This video will be on the respiratory system, which main function is for gas exchange. So let's see where these gases might come from. Let's say we have some tissue here, and as a byproduct of its metabolism, it's going to produce CO2. Now, how is it going to get from, the tissue to the lungs for this gas to be expelled into the environment? And one answer is the circulatory system. So gases can travel in your bloodstream in one form or another. Then it could diffuse into your lungs, and this is how we can expel this gas as CO2. This is also how we can take in oxygen, gas that we need. So this is how we can take in oxygen. So this is the circulatory system in a nutshell. Sorry, the respiratory system. Okay, and this gas exchange happens in your alveoli. So let's see here. To reoxygenate our blood that has been deoxygenated because we dropped off our O2 at tissue, it's going to go through a capillary system that envelops these alveoli. And the alveoli are in the lungs. So this here is the alveoli, and this structure is in the lungs. And this is exactly where gas exchange occurs. So we have our CO2 molecules. They can diffuse and they exit right here. And then it would be up here just like that. And this is also where we can pick up O2 from the environment. So this is where I can pick up O2 and then diffuses across. So now my blood is no longer deoxygenated. First, this is these are capillaries surrounding the alveoli. Now we're no longer deoxygenated blood, but now we are good, fresh, oxygenated blood. And this is going to come from the heart, from all of our tissue. And this is also going to go back to the heart to get pumped to the rest of the body. To heart and eventually the rest of the body. Okay, now let's kind of see where these two gases, another way where these gases come from. Remember the cellular respiration equation? This is where we took, a glucose. We know our glucose is going to become pyruvate. We also require the input of oxygen. This is our O2. And then with the energy from those bonds, we're going to put together the building blocks of ATP, which are these two guys. We're going to create ATP. And then two other byproducts are H2O and water. So here are two gases. We take in O2 again, and we expel CO2. So those are where the gases come from. Okay, so now for the rest of the respiratory tract anatomy. We're going to start off with, we have two places where air can enter from the environment. The first area, we can call this 1A. This is the nasal cavity. So this is where air can enter. Or it could come from this second cavity below. Let's call this 1B. This is the oral cavity, or just the mouth. They both converge to this back of the throat area. We call this, so number 2, we call this the pharynx. And now we're going to have a splitting off here. Some is going to be destined, food and water are going to be destined for the esophagus. But remember, this is part of the digestive system, not the respiratory. And then some particles, namely only gases, are destined for the next structure, the larynx. Remember, larynx is for respiratory. So how do we prevent the wrong thing from going down the wrong tube? Respiratory. Okay, and the answer is we have this little flap of tissue called the epiglottis. So let me see here. So here would be my pharynx, and we know it's going to split off into two. Doesn't look quite like this, but it'll demonstrate what's happening. So again, this is my pharynx. And if this is the esophagus, we know this is destined for the digestive system. This other pathway, this is the larynx. This is only for gas. So this is food and liquid only. For the larynx, we only want gases. Gases only. All right, so we have this, this tissue here that prevents food and water from entering the wrong tract. We call this the epiglottis. Epiglottis. And again, this is going to prevent food and water, food and liquids from entering the larynx. From entering the larynx. Okay, let's continue. So here would be my larynx right here. This would be my number 3. Next is larynx. Then comes this, structure surrounded by cartilage. This is my number 4. This is my trachea. Number 4 is my trachea. Notice it is surrounded by cartilage. Surrounded by cartilage. And I'll finish this down here. Okay. So here is my cartilage surrounded structure, the trachea. So this is the trachea, also known as the windpipe. And the larynx up here, this is also known as the voice box. Larynx is also known as the voice box because that's where you have your vocal cords. Okay, now your trachea is going to branch off, but notice there's still cartilage surrounding these structures. So we call this next step, we call these bronchi. Bronchi. And notice it still has cartilage, surrounded by cartilage. Okay, now we can hit the lungs. So now we are finally entered the lungs. Once inside, your bronchi is going to divide, become even smaller as it gets deeper into the lungs. It gets even smaller. It's going to become even smaller. These smaller subdivisions, we call these bronchioles. So smaller subdivisions are called bronchioles. And then towards the end, we are going to have, little sacs, kind of like so, at the end of each of these, the terminal bronchioles. And these are the alveolar sacs. So now we have reached the alveoli, and this is where gas exchange occurs. Okay, let's do a quick recap. First was the oral and or the nasal cavity. Next is the pharynx. After that is the larynx. We know the epiglottis covers the larynx, so it'll be somewhere around there. After larynx is the trachea. After the trachea is the bronchi, one on each side. Then it's the bronchiole, the divisions inside the lungs, and then we have the alveoli. Let's again notice that the trachea has cartilage. This will help us in the histology. Bronchi also has cartilage. And once we pass into the bronchi, to the bronchiole, this is where we are inside the lungs. This is our checkpoint into the lungs. Okay, so for alveoli under a microscope, not much to see. It is a very thin layer of tissue, and it's also pretty empty. But we do have a one layer of tissue. So these are my cells. And just like most cells in our body, these guys have nuclei, like so. Here are my nuclei. And all this empty region, you're like, what's supposed to be here? This is gas. You'll find normally gas here, but it won't appear anything under a microscope. Now this tissue type for the alveoli, we call this simple squamous epithelium. Simple because notice it's only one layer thick. Squamous means flat. These are flattened cells. And that's why we call this simple squamous epithelium. So here are the alveoli. And here is a picture of that, an actual picture. And here's some more alveoli together in one image. Okay, next is bronchi. So for the bronchi, we're going to have, a different cell type. Okay. So the cells that surround this lumen, this inner region, they are a bit different shaped and thus are given a different name. Okay, and this, goes on for the rest. Okay, this cell type here, we call this convoluted columnar epithelium. Convoluted because the inside is, squiggly shaped, convoluted. Columnar because notice it's these rectangles put together. So here on the inside, you can expect to see gas, but it won't, there's nothing actually there visually. And then surrounding that, we will have, some smooth muscle on the outside of that. So we will have some smooth muscle. We will have some smooth muscle surrounding this bronchi. This is smooth muscle, to help contract. And then surrounding that, we will have, you might see, cartilage. So it might be on a few sides, it might be surrounding it completely. But and then here are the nucleus of the chondrocytes. And these, are usually completely covered, as in there isn't much empty space. So you might see like this. We'll have the nucleus of the chondrocytes, like so. So again, this is cartilage surrounding the bronchi. And these are actually this is the nucleus of the chondrocytes. Nucleus of the chondrocyte. And the rest of the purple stuff is just matrix from that tissue.